A handsome but shady dude named Melaine drops a massive bomb on the woman standing before him. He casually announces that the Senate has officially decided to banish her. Apparently, her magical research is way too dangerous, and half the kingdom hates her guts. She can't believe her ears, remembering how she literally picked this guy off the streets, gave him a high-ranking job, and taught him everything about magic. But Melaine just keeps yapping, claiming the public is terrified of her reckless methods. Hella smirks in pure disbelief at the audacity. She realizes this ungrateful backstabber has completely forgotten who made him who he is. He offers a bogus deal. If she accepts the ruling, they'll only destroy her magical core instead of executing her. She glares at him, absolutely disgusted by the idea of living out her days in forced retirement. He's basically telling the greatest sorceress alive to go knit sweaters as a powerless old lady. Hella finally snaps, asking if he's completely lost his mind. She stomps forward, her patience completely gone. She unleashes a terrifying burst of aura, reminding them all that she literally founded this kingdom of magicians. The surrounding priests instantly flinch, terrified of her overwhelming power. But Melaine just sighs, acting like he gave her a fair chance. Out of nowhere, massive glowing chains erupt from the floor and wrap around her like a straitjacket. She confidently tries to shatter them, assuming her magic is way stronger. But panic sets in when she realizes the chains are completely neutralizing her power. She screams his name in absolute rage. Melaine coldly reveals that he took her unfinished magical research and perfected it just to trap her. He looks her dead in the eyes, repeating that her existence is just too dangerous to leave unchecked. Hella freezes, totally blindsided by the depth of his betrayal. Melaine orders the other priests to ready their spells. They begin chanting without a single ounce of hesitation, proving this whole ambush was planned way in advance. Hella's blood boils so hot she can practically feel a vein popping in her head. She laughs bitterly, realizing she was literally just having drinks with this traitor yesterday. Memories flash of how she treated him like family, fighting side by side through life-or-death battles. He was her most precious disciple, and now he's the one holding the knife. A complex glowing magic circle fully activates beneath her feet. Hella stares down, instantly recognizing the spell matrix. It's complete extinction magic, designed to permanently delete her body, soul, and mana from existence. He is literally using her own inventions to turn her into absolute dust. She looks up at him, demanding to know how he could do something so cruel. But the coward just avoids eye contact and stays totally silent. Looking around, she accepts that not a single person in the room is going to step up and save her. The other priests call out to Melaine as the spell reaches its peak power. He raises his glowing green staff to deal the final blow. Hella screams out a brutal curse, vowing to never forgive him for this. She promises that if she ever comes back to life, he's the first one she's hunting down. She swears to absolutely wreck the man who stepped all over her goodwill. Melaine just talks down to her, calling her totally powerless and useless. She fumes, annoyed that he's gaslighting her into sounding like the ultimate villainess of the story. He points out that even her dark magic can't save her now. Panic and fury mix as the spell begins to consume her entire body. She thinks about how pathetic it is for the kingdom's greatest sorcerer to die like a chump, while Melaine simply says goodbye. Her body instantly vaporizes into a pile of sparkling dust, leaving nothing behind. Suddenly, she realizes she's floating as a blob of consciousness in a giant sea of light. She doesn't even care if she goes to heaven or hell, she just wants a chance to reincarnate and get her revenge. Instantly, her eyes snap open, but she's staring straight up at a fancy chandelier. She gets super confused, wondering why the afterlife looks like a giant's mansion, not realizing she just woke up as a brand new baby. She decides to sit up and look around, but quickly realizes something is seriously wrong with her hands. She notices her arms are super short, and her internal monologue is just straight confusion. Suddenly, she hears someone making weird, babbling noises right next to her. She wonders why her body feels so incredibly sluggish and heavy. Looking down at her tiny, chubby hands, she realizes her words aren't coming out right at all. She falls back onto the bed, completely stunned by the sensation. The horrific realization hits her like a freight train. She has literally reincarnated as an infant. Suddenly, a maid pops her face over the crib, scaring the absolute life out of her. The maid complains about the noise and practically shoves a pacifier straight into Hella's mouth. She lies there, mentally spiraling over the fact that the greatest sorcerer alive is now a helpless, drooling baby. To make matters worse, she starts violently coughing from all the dust in the room. She complains internally, deeply offended that anyone would treat a literal national treasure like this. She huffs, thinking they clearly don't know the massive value of a sorcerer baby. Getting her bearings, she finally manages to flip herself over onto her stomach. She peeks through the crib bars, forced to accept her new tiny reality. She She pouts, realizing her grand plan of living comfortably after dying has been completely ruined by this scrawny body. She buries her face in the mattress, just absolutely fed up with her life right now. But then she pumps herself up, telling herself to lock in and get it together. Going into big brain mode, she deduces that since she still has her memories, this isn't a normal reincarnation, it's a possession. She desperately wishes she could just ask someone for the current year and her location. Glancing around the massive, elegant room, she wonders why it feels so incredibly deserted. A disgruntled maid walks in, audibly complaining about being stuck on baby duty for the week. The maid suddenly stops, genuinely shocked to see the baby has already rolled over. But then she mutters something about Hela being a half-blood with an accent tied to the outskirts. Hearing that, Hela's mind immediately jumps to the infamous Aeron Empire. She freezes in absolute horror, realizing she's in the exact same empire as the bastard who betrayed her. She tries to calm down, reminding herself that keeping her memories is the biggest W here. Sitting up like a boss, she realizes her brain is finally running smoothly again. But then she looks around, totally offended that they plan to keep her locked in this stuffy little baby cage. She frantically waves her tiny arms at the maid, demanding to be let out immediately. The maid completely ignores her, making Hela wonder if the woman is literally deaf. Since she's trapped, she decides to test out if her new body can still handle her old mana. She hypes herself up to do a quick magic check. Straining hard, she realizes she probably looks like a baby trying to poop, which is wildly embarrassing. Suddenly, a heavy vase on a nearby nightstand completely shatters into pieces. The maid freaks out over the random mess, but Hela is practically cheering on the inside because she can still use magic. She realizes her massive mana pool is still there. Her baby senses are just too dull to feel it properly yet. She immediately formulates a master plan, figure out where she is, escape, and then head back to her home country to unleash absolute revenge. But reality quickly sets in as she struggles to even push herself up. She huffs and puffs, utterly betrayed by how weak her tiny noodle arms and legs are. She sighs, accepting that her grand revenge tour is definitely on hold for now. Realizing she can't even travel like this, she decides to focus on training her mana instead of just sitting around. With a burst of pure concentration, she successfully levitates herself right over the crib railing. She floats gently toward the floor, knowing she has to keep her focus tight or the spell will break. She makes a mental note that if she loses control, she's definitely going to face plant right into the marble. But she sticks the landing perfectly, crawling on the floor like an absolute champion. Determined, she starts speed crawling out of the room to gather some intel. Almost immediately, she pauses, realizing her soft little baby knees are getting completely wrecked by the hard floor. She curses the staff for having zero consideration and not even putting down a single rug. Suddenly, the maid snatches her up, completely baffled by how a baby escaped, while Hela stares into the mirror, shocked to see she now has striking, glowing silver eyes. Realizing she has silver eyes in the Aeron Empire, Hela internally panics, knowing exactly which infamous family she belongs to. Before she can strategize, the annoyed maid tells her to sleep and literally plugs her mouth with a pacifier. Hela tries to stay awake to process the Aeron Empire connection, but a massive yawn cuts her off. Her eyelids get incredibly heavy as her infantile instincts threaten to shut her down. She grips the pacifier, realizing she has to fight her own biology just to stay conscious. Fast forward a whole month, and Hela has completely given up on acting out, quietly surviving in her massive but neglected room. She's been using this time to quietly observe everything and gather some crucial intel. Her first big deduction: the maids rotate every single week and couldn't care less about her. Since everyone treats her like an annoying chore, she knows she won't get any useful info out of them. They literally just shove a bottle in her face and leave her completely abandoned for up to 5 hours at a time. Her second big brain discovery is that she actually has to aggressively suck on her dirty pacifier just to keep her adult mind from falling asleep. Third, she connects the dots on her family lore. The Crown Duchy is descended from a heavenly being who fell in love with a human. That divine bloodline is exactly why their descendants are born with super rare silver eyes. She remembers that one of those descendants was a massive MVP in establishing the current empire. Because of his loyalty, the first emperor hooked him up with massive privileges and the official nobility title of crown. Which brings her to her fourth deduction, her current identity. Based on her terrible treatment, she realizes she's definitely a high-born crown, but an incredibly unwanted one. She pieces together that she must be an illegitimate half-blood, dumped in a dusty room despite being 10 months old. She prays she isn't the daughter of the notoriously unhinged Charent crown, hoping instead she's just a late bloomer mistake of the current family head. But if the family head is her dad, that means the crazy Charent is her older brother. Terrified, she resolves to unlock her magic and GTFO immediately. Her master plan is to escape to a random orphanage where she can live off the grid without any royal baggage. But since the Crown Duchy is a military powerhouse, she decides she's going to absolutely rob their secret military vault before she dips. Hyped up on her own ambition, she officially begins her grand exploration of the mansion. But first things first, this crusty pacifier is way too gross to keep in her mouth. She speed crawls down the massive, luxurious hallway on a mission to find a washing spot. The sheer scale of the mansion makes her look like a tiny bug on the floor. She stops to catch her breath, completely gassed because her baby stamina is absolute trash. She realizes exploring is going to take forever, while also admitting that the pacifier is weirdly comfortable. It definitely stabilizes her mind, even if she feels completely pathetic relying on a baby toy at her actual age. Shaking off the cringe, she looks around, determined to at least sanitize the thing. Suddenly, the hallway opens up into a breathtakingly gorgeous room. Jackpot, she spots a massive indoor water fountain bathed in sunlight. She happily crawls toward the beautiful, tiered fountain, ready to wash her prized possession. But as she gets closer, her face completely drops in sheer horror. To her tiny 10-month-old body, the fountain basin looks like a massive stone wall. She stands up on her tiptoes, frustrated that she can't even see the water over the edge. She looks back down the insanely long hallway, debating if she should just take the L and crawl back to bed. But Hella refuses to quit, stubbornly trying to scale the slippery marble ledge anyway. Meanwhile, the head of the Crown family, Deshar, is walking by with his aide, Kant. Deshar stops in his tracks, pointing at the tiny struggling creature by the fountain and asking what it is. Kant deadpans that it's obviously a baby, prompting an annoyed glare from the Duke, who obviously knew that. Deshar clarifies his question, wondering why a random infant is loose in his mansion. Kant sighs at the terrible parenting and suggests it's likely the late youngest master's daughter. Deshar is genuinely shocked, realizing his nephew Valian's kid is already crawling around. He watches her curiously, wondering what on earth this tiny child is trying to accomplish. Suddenly, a cold voice interrupts, asking Deshar what he's staring at. It's the famously ruthless heir of the duchy, Charent Crown. They all stand there in silence, watching the tiny baby grunt and struggle against the giant fountain. Charent asks who the kid is, and Deshar calmly explains it's his late uncle's child. Charent's eyes instantly go ice cold as he realizes this is the illegitimate half-blood his uncle had with a nameless woman, glaring at her like she doesn't even belong there. Charent coldly explains that his uncle died, leaving this newborn to be dumped at the mansion. Meanwhile, Hella is still fighting for her life trying to climb the fountain. She violently slaps the marble ledge, refusing to give up on washing her pacifier. Kant clears his throat awkwardly as the three men just stare at the bizarre spectacle. Charent glares at her, his magical aura flaring dangerously as he stews over her very existence. A slacking maid suddenly jumps, terrified as Charent points out the staff clearly isn't doing their jobs. Deshar calmly orders his son to dial back his intense killing intent, but Charent just scoffs, asking his father if he's gone soft. Deshar brushes it off, telling him he's being way pricklier than necessary over a literal infant. Charent falls silent, his eyes locked on the tiny interloper. Completely oblivious to the intense family drama, Hella is still failing to reach the water. She internally weeps, realizing her tiny T-Rex arms won't reach the water even if she tries for 100 days. But then a light bulb goes off. She remembers she can just use her magic to levitate the pacifier into the fountain. She powers up, ready to cast a quick spell. Except she instantly loses her balance because she can't focus her mana while standing on two stubby baby legs. She realizes she'd have to flop on her belly to cast the spell, which is just way too embarrassing to do in broad daylight. Absolutely furious at her useless body, she shakes her pacifier and lets out an angry baby squeal, instantly cringing at how ridiculous she sounds. Utterly defeated, she plops down on her butt and pops the dirty pacifier back into her mouth. Suddenly, she hears voices and wonders why a crowd is gathering in the hallway. She looks over and officially confirms her worst fears. Deshar and Charent Crown are standing right there. Noting that they haven't aged a bit, she realizes she must have reincarnated almost immediately after her death. She breaks out in a cold sweat, incredibly thankful she didn't cast that spell or she would have been exposed instantly. Staring at Charent, she remembers exactly why this guy is such a massive headache. He's an absolute genius with flawless judgment, and he literally specializes in anti-magic combat. She flashes back to dealing with him in her past life, remembering him as an arrogant jerk who refused to even look at anyone below his status. But Deshar Crown is the real final boss. Back in the day, she was constantly pushed into a corner by his aggressive diplomatic tactics. She remembers staying up late, agonizing over her replies to his letters just to keep her nation safe. That sheer stubbornness was the only way she made up for her lack of political experience. It was how she fiercely defended her precious country from these monsters. Snapping back to reality, she vows that this time, she's going to completely wipe the floor with them by stealing all their military secrets. She pumps her tiny fists in the air, hyping herself up for the ultimate heist. Meanwhile, Deshar glares at the panicked maid, demanding to know why the baby isn't in her room. The maid shrieks and sprints toward Hela, totally startling her. Hela curses the two dukes under her breath, calling them cowardly bastards for ruining her plans. Refusing to go back to that dusty prison, she hits the deck and turbo crawls away like a gremlin. She literally drifts around the garden corners while the maid desperately chases her, all in front of the dumbfounded nobles. Kant watches the chaotic chase and dryly compares her to a scurrying cockroach. Charent clicks his tongue, annoyed that his father is even letting the kid stay in the house. Deshar shuts him down, firmly reminding him that a half-blood will never be allowed to take the official crown surname. Charent scowls, admitting that the mere thought of this illegitimate baby joining the main bloodline absolutely sickens him. Ignorant to their trash talk, Hela is still zooming across the marble floors. Charent tells his father to drop it, fully understanding her worthless place in the family hierarchy. The maid begs her to stop, but Hela just keeps crawling, mentally mocking the woman for thinking she'd actually listen. But her tiny stamina gives out, and the maid finally snatches her up like a rag doll. As the maid complains about getting scolded, Hela's ego absolutely shatters, realizing the great sorcerer was just easily outmaneuvered by a random servant. Back in her crib prison, she babbles helplessly. A new maid leans over, casually noting that she's been a lot quieter lately. The maid carelessly shoves the pacifier back in to keep her quiet, and Hela's infant instincts take over, making her giggle and roll around like a normal baby. A second later, her adult consciousness snaps back, and she is absolutely mortified by her own adorable behavior. While the maid yawns and complains about her cushy job, Hela fumes in her crib, completely fed up with being trapped in this dusty nightmare. Suddenly, Hela freezes, realizing an entire week has somehow just flashed by. She mentally facepalms, wondering how she got trapped in an endless loop of doing absolutely nothing. For 7 straight days, she's basically lived like a literal NPC, just eating, sleeping, and repeating. She figures her baby brain hasn't fully booted up yet because she's stuck in that dusty, neglected crib all day. She remembers falling asleep right on the dirty floor the last time she tried to escape. Complaining about the musty smell, she reflects on how a mage's body usually purifies itself. That natural purification process is exactly why magic users rarely get sick. She flashes back to her past life, knowing mages are practically immune to normal diseases. But she also knows that a young body experiencing a massive mana spike can be super dangerous. She realizes sucking on the pacifier is actually suppressing her mana to keep her safe, even if it temporarily turns her brain to mush. Getting frustrated, she fumes over the fact that if she could just use her original magic, all her problems would be solved instantly. Pushed to her absolute limit, she decides she is washing this stinky pacifier today no matter what. She sneaks out of her room again, successfully making it all the way out to the estate's massive gardens. She hypes herself up, declaring that a little baby body can't stop the greatest sorcerer in history. Moving onto the grass, she notes that crawling outside is way better than wrecking her knees on the hard stone floors inside. She grumbles that whoever designed this place clearly had zero consideration for crawling infants. Still, she accepts her current situation and stays totally focused on the mission. She knows she's the ultimate neglected half-blood, but she vows to become the world's strongest wizard anyway. In her mind, she draws up a flawless plan to completely stomp on the Aeron Empire and its stuck-up dukes. She smirks proudly at her master plan, though she gets a little self-conscious about her flat baby nose. Crawling deeper into the garden, she spots a quiet, secluded pond with nobody around. She completely lights up, thrilled to have finally found a safe spot to do her baby laundry. The beautiful little pond is perfectly tucked away behind a massive floral arch. She speed crawls toward the water like her life depends on it, ready to say goodbye to the stinky germs. Sitting right on the edge, she prepares for the ultimate wash. She reaches out to dunk the pacifier, but suddenly realizes there's a massive problem. She stares blankly at the water. Her tiny T-Rex arms literally cannot reach the surface. She panics, wondering why she can't just bend over, only to realize her baby torso is way too short. Doing some quick physics math, she realizes that if she leans forward any further, her center of gravity will completely betray her. One wrong move and she'll take a nosedive straight into the pond. Refusing to accept defeat, she tries to brainstorm another way to reach the water. She tells herself there has to be a way to support her stubby body safely. A light bulb goes off. If she can't sit and reach, maybe she can just lie down. Praising her own genius, she flops onto her stomach and scoots right up to the ledge. With a triumphant splash, she finally dunks the pacifier into the pond. She is absolutely thrilled, kicking her little legs and celebrating her clean victory. But when she looks closely, she realizes dipping it in a pond didn't actually wipe the dirt off at all. She accepts that it's still kind of gross, but just touching the water makes her feel a tiny bit better. Suddenly, a voice calls out from behind her, totally breaking her focus. Startled, her arms flail, and she accidentally yeets her precious pacifier straight up into the air. She watches in absolute slow-motion horror as it arcs toward the pond. Scrambling onto her feet, she reaches out desperately to save her lifeline. She wails in pure despair as the pacifier plummets toward the grass near the water's edge. But before it hits the ground, a blur of motion swoops in. Someone snatches it right out of the air like an absolute pro, leaving Hella completely stunned. The mysterious savior hands it back, casually flexing that he caught it in under 3 seconds, so it's perfectly safe. Still on the ground, Hella looks up in confusion to see a well-dressed young boy. She freezes, a cold sweat breaking out as she realizes this kid is a literal mini-me of the cold-hearted Charent Crown. Sucking on her rescued pacifier, her brain clicks. She remembers hearing rumors that her worst enemy recently had a son, and she's staring right at him. The boy warns her that if his dad finds out she's here, she's in massive trouble. Hella notes they look alike, but the kid seems a bit softer. She remembers his father, Charent Crown, perfectly. The guy was literally nicknamed the Iron-Blooded Demon because he'd cut off his own allies without a second thought. He was notoriously elitist, refusing to associate with anyone who wasn't incredibly capable or from a top-tier bloodline, completely looking down on Hella for her humble roots. She practically pulls her hair out, mentally screaming at the maids for abandoning her alone with this terrifying family. Just the thought of being related to that absolute psycho gives her full-body goosebumps. She studies the Minicherant, guessing he's about 5 years old. She starts doing some quick math on her own growth. She figures by the time she hits his age, her body should be able to handle lower circle magic. Actually, since she's a reincarnated grandmage, she bets she can fast-track her way straight to intermediate spells. Once she can craft and sell magic stones, surviving on her own will be a total breeze. Her master plan, level up, grab all the juicy military secrets, and dip. With her plan set, she completely dismisses the kid, basically telling him to kick rocks in her head. She goes back to furiously scrubbing her pacifier, feeling a little weird about the whole situation. But she figures the more she dunks it, the less it'll smell like a musty closet. The kid awkwardly splashes the water, warning her that the grandfathers really don't like her. He tries to act tough, calling her a damn little kid. Hella just clicks her tongue, thinking it makes sense he acts like a little edgelord growing up in this icy household. Then the boy drops a horrifying question, asking if she's going to get kicked out. He casually mentions that a servant accidentally wandered into this garden the other day and literally got their tendons sliced before being tossed out. Hella freezes, cold sweat dripping down her face as she remembers that Charent is a certified lunatic. She flashes back to her past life, remembering how she literally begged her aides to get her out of diplomatic meetings with him. The guy was so intensely intimidating that just sitting at the same table made her dizzy. Whenever Charent spoke, the entire room of powerful wizards would just shut their mouths out of pure fear. Shaking off the trauma, she vows to eventually wipe the floor with the entire empire and reclaim her throne. The boy interrupts her scheming, warning her again that his father is terrifying. He explains this specific garden is strictly off-limits because his dad takes care of it himself. Hella is completely mind-blown, unable to picture the cold-blooded demon actually planting roses. The kid sadly reveals that it used to be his mother's absolute favorite place. Hella cringes hard, praying this 5-year-old isn't about to trauma dump his parents' messy private life onto a literal infant. But he drops the tea anyway. His parents had a massive blowout fight and ended up divorcing. She aggressively chews her pacifier, definitely not wanting to know the juicy gossip of her worst enemy's failed marriage. Suddenly, the kid's eyes well up with tears as he whispers that he really likes his mom. He curls into a tiny ball on the grass, crying that he misses her, completely catching Hella off guard. She tries to stay totally detached, reminding herself that he's the enemy's kid and she doesn't owe him any kindness. But seeing him cry makes her realize Charent must not be the most attentive father either. She stares at him, feeling incredibly awkward and having zero clue how to handle a crying toddler. She knows empty comfort won't actually fix his broken home, and she's not about to lie to him. Luckily, he wipes his tears and stands up, saying he needs to sneak back inside before his maid notices he's gone. Before leaving, he turns and asks what she's going to do if she gets caught. Hella just stares back with a blank baby face, offering absolutely nothing. Once he's gone, she focuses on her scraped knees, figuring she just needs to build up her crawling calluses. She nods confidently, knowing she'll eventually speed crawl like a pro. Suddenly, the heavy crunch of expensive leather shoes echoes on the grass. Hella panics, someone is definitely coming and crawling away will be way too slow. Without hesitating, she executes a flawless tactical barrel roll right into the bushes. Peeking through the leaves like a tiny spy, she checks to see who interrupted her escape. Her heart practically stops as the towering, menacing figure of Charent Crown steps into the garden. She realizes that if he had caught her, her tiny baby tendons would have been instantly wrecked. Terrified of becoming baby sushi, she quietly speed crawls through the foliage to get the heck out of there. Despite her grand ambitions, for now she is nothing more than the hidden, unwanted stain on the Duke's flawless family tree. Charent stares blankly, casually contemplating just killing the intruder. He figures he could simply claim it was a total accident in the heat of the moment. But his aide, Kant, points out that making a sloppy mistake like that is practically impossible for someone of his legendary skill level. Changing his mind, Charent decides he can't just let this slide and leaves to investigate. He strides into his private garden, his sharp eyes scanning the area. The moment little Kaishin sees his terrifying father, he literally hiccups in fear. The boy stammers, nervously apologizing for entering the forbidden garden without permission. Surprisingly, the iron-blooded demon actually chills out, telling his son it's perfectly fine. However, Charent immediately spots the messed-up grass and asks if Kaishin is out here alone. Kaishin shakes his head, admitting there's a kid hiding nearby. Charent assumes his son is crying over his missing mother, but Kaishin clarifies that the baby is just busy washing a gross pacifier. The usually terrifying Duke gently pats his son's head. He calmly tells Kaishin to head back inside first. Kaishin looks up, totally caught off guard by his dad's rare, gentle touch. The kid nervously wonders if his dad is about to go absolutely ballistic on the poor baby. But Charent just shoos him away, keeping his usual cold poker face. Watching his son leave, Charent actually wonders if he's raised the boy too softly. He turns his attention back to the bushes, completely baffled that a literal infant managed to crawl this far just for a pacifier. His paranoid mind starts working overtime, wondering if this baby is secretly plotting something massive. The next morning rolls around and Hella wakes up in her stuffy crib. She pops the pacifier in her mouth, noting that it actually feels pretty clean and refreshing today. She starts doing some baby crunches to build up her stamina, but quickly notices something is off. Her stomach violently growls and it hits her. She didn't eat a single thing yesterday. She knows she snuck back into her room completely undetected, but the panic sets in as she realizes she's currently running on literal 0 calories. She grasps the crib bars, terrified that she's going to die and turn into a hungry ghost. She knows the maids absolutely despise checking her dusty corner of the mansion. But then a dark thought crosses her mind. What if they caught her sneaking out and are starving her out of pure spite? She shudders, convinced that starving to death is the absolute worst punishment imaginable. Then she realizes there's an even worse possibility. What if Charent found out she trespassed in his precious garden and personally ordered a total food ban? She furiously bumps him up to number 2 on her revenge hit list, right behind Melaine. Deciding to wait it out, she hopes the maids are just running super late. She tells herself to conserve her energy and be patient. But a few excruciating hours pass and the massive doors stay completely shut. Hella completely loses her mind, shrieking in the crib as she realizes they're genuinely leaving her to rot. She refuses to let her second life end as a neglected, starving infant. She fiercely declares that she will survive this place, even if she literally has to go outside and chew on grass. Locking in, she starts formulating a desperate survival plan. She remembers seeing a bunch of bright red berries back in Charent's private garden. She figures she can just crawl back over there and scavenge for fruit. Plus, if she manages to control her mana better, she can just levitate the berries right off the branches. But right now, the immediate crisis is her totally empty stomach. She pushes through the hunger pains, giving herself a massive mental pep talk. She convinces herself that crawling around and getting bruised is just hardcore physical training to build a stronger body. She deduces that crawling all the way back to the garden might drain her remaining energy. Instead, she decides to use her knowledge of standard noble architecture to track down the mansion's kitchen. She sneaks past the oblivious staff, successfully navigating the massive first floor. Following the delicious scent of food wafting down the hallway, she finally hits the jackpot. Sitting proudly in front of a pair of massive double doors, the tiny infant smirks, fully prepared to break in and claim her feast. Hella reaches the heavy kitchen doors and leans back, putting her entire baby body weight into her legs just to push them open. Hearing a satisfying click, the massive door slowly swings open. But as she crawls inside, she suddenly pauses, wondering what human children are actually supposed to eat. She realizes she has literally 0 clue what a standard baby diet looks like. She figures they usually drink powdered milk, but since she has 2 front teeth now, solid fruit should definitely be fair game. She crawls into the massive kitchen, finding it completely empty but fully stocked with a giant, delicious feast. Her mouth waters as she notices they even cooked a massive pot of savory soup. But logic quickly kicks in, realizing there is absolutely no way her clumsy baby hands can eat hot soup right now without catching third-degree burns. Scanning the room, she spots a wooden crate overflowing with big, juicy red apples. She knows they'll be tough to chew, but figures if she blasts them with a little magic, she can basically turn them into apple juice. Since the kitchen is dead quiet, she deduces the staff must be out on a break, giving her the perfect window. Using her mana, she seamlessly levitates 2 massive apples right out of the crate. Mission accomplished. But then she realizes carrying 2 giant fruits as an infant is mathematically impossible. She brainstorms for a second and attempts to just shove one of the massive apples right down her tiny dress. But gravity instantly betrays her, and the apple completely plops out onto the floor. Stubborn as ever, she reaches out, refusing to give up on her meal. Changing tactics, she uses her magic to just aggressively roll the apples across the floor like bowling balls. She feels a bit ridiculous doing it, keeping her pacifier looped on her finger, but a girl's gotta fill her stomach. She carefully rolls her bounty down the massive hallways, slowly making her way back to her dusty room. She groans in annoyance, the long crawl taking an absolute toll on her tiny, uncoordinated body. Back in her crib under extreme stress and irritation, she gets to work on her meal. Using a genius spell, she literally channels all her magical power directly into her 2 front teeth just to bite through the fruit. Later that day, she sits in her crib, waiting to see if a maid will actually show up to check on her. She quietly munches on her apple, realizing they really aren't coming. Thus marks the successful but exhausting end to her very first day of pure survival mode. Fast forward 2 entire weeks, and Hella has amassed a glorious, colorful hoard of fruits and berries right in her crib. She wipes her brow, looking incredibly proud of her little scavenger stash. Honestly, it's an absolute miracle she survived the last 14 days. Especially considering not a single person has opened the door to her room since. She realizes the maids wouldn't intentionally starve a noble out of pure malice, but if she were a normal infant, she'd literally be dead by now. She clicks her tongue, deeply humiliated that the great archmage Hella has been reduced to living like a feral raccoon. But she shrugs it off. With her massive fruit hoard, her survival is completely guaranteed for now. She looks out the window, noting that alongside the kitchen apples, she's been foraging for edible berries and flowers outside. She's officially established a healthy daily routine to ensure proper baby growth, which includes a trip to the garden to wash her pacifier. Thanks to the thick calluses building up on her knees, crawling on the hard stone doesn't even hurt anymore. She's practically evolving. She mentally pats herself on the back, proud that she's thriving despite the insane neglect. She finally arrives at her favorite spot, the beautiful garden archway that she basically views as her personal food warehouse. She notes that the fancy flowers and berries in her room stash were straight up stolen from Charent's private garden. She rustles through the bushes, eagerly looking for her next snack. But she suddenly gasps, remembering that Charent is an absolute psycho with hawk eyes. She notices that the flower stalks she sneakily plucked from the inside last time have been cleanly snipped off. He totally noticed her theft. Terrified, she imagines Charent coldly holding his gardening shears, fearing he might literally snip her neck next if he catches her. Suddenly, she hears a quiet sniffle nearby and freezes, recognizing the cry. Peeking through the leaves, she spots Charent's son hugging his knees and crying out for his mom again. Hella hides, realizing he comes here to cry a lot, remembering how she ran into him last time she was foraging. Last time, the boy had spotted her crawling and asked what she was doing in the grass. She had just played the dumb baby card, totally ignoring him and crawling away without issue. Sighing, she decides to lay low today. If he's out here, she'll just skip the fruit heist and stick to washing her pacifier. Watching him quietly, she realizes she doesn't even know his real name, mentally dubbing him Son of Charent Crown as she sneaks by. She watches Kaisen silently sniffle in the garden, desperately hoping he won't turn around and spot her spying. She internally complains, finding this whole situation incredibly annoying. She absolutely does not want to hear any more tragic details about Charent Crown's broken marriage. But her luck immediately runs out as Kaisen spots her crawling by the pond and asks if she's busy. He politely asks if she can wash something for him. She sighs in absolute relief, incredibly thankful he didn't start trauma dumping on her again. As she dunks her pacifier in the water, Kaisen crouches beside her, curiously asking what she does out here all day. She mentally rolls her eyes, practically begging this kid to just leave her alone so she can plot in peace. But Kaisen is persistent. He gently taps her shoulder to get her attention. She stalls, totally ignoring him while aggressively scrubbing her pacifier in the water. Honestly, ignoring him feels like a pretty solid strategy right now. She scrubs so hard her tiny hands start to cramp up, finally deciding it's clean enough for a first wash. Kaisen watches her struggle and completely misunderstands the situation, happily cheering her on like she's doing some great task for him. Hella looks at him, totally confused. What does he think she's cleaning? She sits back on the grass, giving him a massive side-eye as he continues to stare at her expectantly. She figures he probably has some gross kid dirt on his hands, maybe some magical slime residue or something. She briefly daydreams about inventing a self-cleaning pacifier using purified slime fluid, thinking it would make her secret survival life way easier. Snapping back to reality, she finally hands him her freshly washed pacifier, mentally asking if this is what he wanted. Kaisen's face completely lights up as he accepts it, touched that this random baby is actually trying to help him feel better. He gently wipes the remaining dirt off the pacifier with his own pristine clothes, making Hella extremely satisfied that he's basically doing the final polish for her. Proud of a job well done, Kaisen suggests they both head back inside so she can take a nap. He leans in closely, gently warning her that she really shouldn't be wandering around this specific garden all the time. Hella completely ignores his warning, dramatically turning her back on him like a total diva. She complains internally, deciding that since her secret spot is compromised today, she might as well just go back to bed and sleep off the annoyance. As she starts crawling away, Kaisen scuttles right behind her, eagerly asking for her name. She whips her head around, utterly baffled as to why this noble kid is so obsessed with following a random baby. She throws her tiny hands up, absolutely fed up with his persistence. She glares at him, wishing she could actually speak so she could just tell him to scram. Suddenly, a massive, terrifying shadow falls over both of them, and a harsh, screeching caw echoes through the garden. Hella freezes, a cold chill running down her spine as her past life instincts immediately recognize that specific, terrifying sound. She looks up and gasps in absolute horror. A massive, fully grown griffin is diving straight out of the sky toward them. She panics, wondering why a high-level monster that usually guards ancient ruins is randomly swooping into a private garden. She quickly realizes that griffins actively prey on small, weak creatures. And right now, she and Kaisen are literally the perfect bite-sized snacks. Before she can react, the massive bird locks onto them. Kaisen, absolutely terrified, tries to scramble forward to shield the baby, throwing his arms out to protect her. Suddenly, Deshar Crown bursts into the garden with his guards, roaring in fury at the sight of the beast attacking his grandson. Hella stays hidden, relieved that the powerful Duke is here to handle the situation. Deshar furiously demands to know how a monster breached the estate's defenses. Peeking from behind a tree, she watches Deshar step forward, his aura instantly radiating intense, overwhelming power. The griffin lets out a desperate, pained screech, a sound Hella knows all too well from her past battles. It's the cry of a beast fighting for its absolute life. The monster fiercely flaps its wings, diving aggressively toward the only target it thinks it can beat, little Kaisen. Hella curses silently. She literally tried to warn the kid to run away. Suddenly, Charent Crown materializes out of thin air, a blur of dark magic and pure killing intent. He calls out to his son, his voice eerily calm despite the massive monster diving right at them. Kaisen bursts into tears of pure relief and throws himself into his father's protective embrace. Charent gently catches him, his usually icy face completely softening into a look of genuine, warm relief as he holds his son tight. Hella watches from behind the tree, completely stunned. The iron-blooded demon actually cares about his kid. She is totally thrown off, having assumed a cold-hearted monster like him wouldn't even know what family love was. The tender moment ends instantly. Charent's eyes go dead cold as he summons a massive, glowing spear of pure magic, coldly mocking the griffin for daring to step into his territory. He steps in front of the beast, dark energy violently swirling around him as he prepares to completely eradicate the threat. Hella watches in awe, realizing the terrifying rumors about Charent's absurd strength are absolutely true. She remembers the legends of him effortlessly clearing high-level ruins with just a small squad of elites. She shrinks back behind the tree, deciding to just sit tight and let the psycho deal with the giant bird so she doesn't get caught in the crossfire. The griffin screeches one last time, completely unaware that it just picked a fight with the most dangerous man in the Empire, as Charent calmly prepares to wreck it into oblivion. Deshar barks at his guards, absolutely furious that the estate's magical defenses were breached. Hella pauses her escape, suddenly realizing that the nearby ancient ruins actually belong to the Crown Duchy. Meanwhile, Charent readies his spear, looking completely unfazed by the giant bird. The griffin screeches wildly, flailing around in a panic. Watching from the bushes, Hella deduces that the beast likely lost its master and just wandered off course. but it leaves a bitter taste in her mouth. She questions why the Empire's dangerous monuments aren't being properly secured. She knows the artifact inside this specific monument falls under the Magic Tower's jurisdiction, which means the staff over at the tower are completely dropping the ball. In this world, ancient monuments are basically giant mystery dungeons. They've been around since ancient times, acting as the main spawning point for terrifying demonic beasts. But deep inside these ruins sleep powerful artifacts. These items hold insane abilities, ranging from holy cleansing magic to dark curses, making them insanely valuable. The real problem is actually getting to them. You have to descend into massive, labyrinth-like basements with no idea where the bottom is. And those dark corners are completely swarming with deadly monsters like the griffin. Out of the 37 known monuments in the world, surviving a raid is basically a suicide mission for most. People don't dare enter without elite skills. Currently, the Magic Tower strictly manages 3 of these artifacts. 2 of them radiate dark, evil energy, while the last one is purely divine. The Aeron Empire holds 2 artifacts, one locked in the Imperial Palace and the other right here at the Crown Duchy. Hella fumes, wondering how her backstabbing disciple Melaine is running the Magic Tower so poorly. She mentally yells at the traitor to actually do his job if he's going to steal her position. Having gathered enough intel, she gets a bad feeling and resumes crawling back to her room. She decides her best move is to just go hide, eat her stash of berries, and take a massive nap. As she scoots away, she thinks back to Charent hugging his son, realizing the cold-blooded demon actually has a soft spot. She scoffs, thinking it must be nice to have someone swoop in and save you. But her bitter past makes her write them off as pitiful fools. Her knees start throbbing again, making her worry she's going to go completely bow-legged from all this crawling. Finally safely back in her dusty room, she eagerly turns to her secret stash of fruit. She grabs a handful of juicy red berries, completely thrilled to finally fill her stomach. Outside, the terrifying screeches of the griffin echo through the estate, but she figures the elite knights are just handling business. She happily munches on a berry, her mood instantly skyrocketing. But suddenly, a massive, terrifying shadow falls over her entire room. She hears the guards shouting outside that the beast is making a break for the mansion. Hella's heart drops into her stomach as she slowly turns around. The giant griffin is literally perched right outside her window, staring straight in. The monster tilts its head, its piercing eyes locking onto the tiny baby on the floor. Hella realizes with absolute dread that she is completely doomed. Griffins are vicious carnivores with insanely sharp senses. Worse yet, they are instinctively attracted to the color red, associating it with the blood of their prey. And Hella is currently sitting there holding a literal fistful of bright red berries. The griffin lets out a deafening roar and absolutely shatters the glass window, lunging inside. Hella screams and scrambles toward the giant double doors, but remembers she shut them tightly on her way in. She tries to cast an unlocking spell, but she already burned through her daily mana allowance and has nothing left in the tank. Plus, with a giant monster breathing down her neck, she can't focus her mind at all. Trapped in the corner, she frantically tries to think of a way out. She dips into her past life knowledge, remembering that griffins are actually cowardly and sadistic hunters. They don't just kill right away, they play with their food, torturing their prey until it's completely exhausted and gives up. Only then do they move in for the final, fatal strike. Hella glares at the beast, absolutely refusing to let her second life end as a literal bird snack. As the massive griffin steps into her room, the infant archmage prepares to fight back with whatever she has left. She knows countless weaknesses for griffins from her past life, but right now, none of them matter because her baby body literally can't execute any of those strategies. Frustrated, she complains that even in a literal life-or-death situation, she's still forced to suck on the stupid pacifier just to keep her head straight. But then, looking at the pacifier gives her a massive light bulb moment. There is one trick she can pull off without much power. As the griffin shatters the window frame and looms over her, Hella decides to risk it all. She's not entirely sure her crazy plan will work, but she scuttles forward anyway, dodging the massive talons. She remembers the weirdly specific properties of the random berries she's been hoarding for the past 2 weeks. The berries she ate earlier are blue when unripe. If she crushes them together with rose leaves, it creates a pungent scent that griffins absolutely detest. Since the beast has incredibly sensitive olfaction, the intense smell acts like a flashbang, totally disorienting them and temporarily blinding their senses. Her master plan: crush the ingredients together, then use a quick burst of basic gravity magic to blow the nasty mixture right into the overgrown chicken's face. She nods confidently, certain the makeshift pepper spray will buy her enough time to escape. But there's a huge problem. What is she supposed to grind the ingredients with? With her current mana limits, she can only manage basic gravity magic, which she already burned through just turning the massive doorknob earlier. She doesn't have the raw power or the fine control needed to magically crush the berries and leaves. Normally, she'd just grab a rock to smash them, or basically anything hard and heavy enough to act as a mortar. But she frantically looks around her dusty prison of a room, realizing there is absolutely nothing she can use as a tool. Out of options, she decides she just has to brute force it with her bare baby hands. She clenches her tiny fists, squeezing the berries and leaves with literally every ounce of strength her 10-month-old body can muster. She strains so hard her face turns red, but the berries barely yield a single drop of juice. Her grip strength is just too pathetic. Meanwhile, the griffin snaps its head toward her, its sharp eyes locking onto her struggling form. Ignoring the danger, she keeps squeezing with all her might, desperately praying for the berries to pop. But time runs out, the griffin lets out a deafening, blood-curdling shriek. Hella feels a tiny pop in her hands and thinks she finally did it. But as she looks up, she's met with the horrifying sight of the beast rearing back, ready to strike. She realizes her tiny squirt of juice did absolutely nothing. The monster's killer instincts already locked onto her as easy prey. Squeezing the fruit alone just isn't enough to trigger the chemical reaction or create a strong enough scent. The massive griffin fully extends its deadly talons, diving straight for her tiny body. Hella squeezes her eyes shut, accepting that she completely miscalculated and is about to get sliced in half. Suddenly, a familiar voice coldly echoes through the room, mocking the beast for making such useless movements. A blinding flash of dark magic streaks through the air right as Hella braces for the end. She opens her eyes to see the massive griffin pinned completely to the floor, Charon's magical spear driven cleanly through its back. While the threat is neutralized, Hella just stares at the floor in pure devastation. Her precious, 2-week hoard of survival berries has been completely smashed and scattered everywhere. Furious that her food is ruined, she completely loses her filter and mentally screams at Charon, calling him a massive jerk for making a mess. She glares at him, absolutely mortified that the iron-blooded demon had to save her life. She feels utterly pathetic, officially marking this as the lowest point of her 2 lifetimes. Sighing internally, she accepts the grim reality. She's going to have to start foraging all over again. Meanwhile, Charon just stares down at her, looking mildly confused by her intense glare, probably wondering why this baby is looking at him like he's a cockroach. He tilts his head, silently questioning what exactly this weird kid's deal is. Deshar finally bursts into the ruined room, yelling for his son and asking if he managed to put the beast down. The older duke stops in his tracks, his eyes landing on the tiny baby sitting amidst the carnage. He turns to Charon, completely baffled as to why the illegitimate child is sitting in this random, destroyed room. Hella intensely glares at Deshar, incredibly offended by his stupid question. She mentally shouts that she's here because they literally locked her in this dusty prison. She fumes, furious that the people who neglected her have the audacity to act surprised about where she sleeps. She looks down at the smashed berries, getting genuinely emotional over the hard work she put into gathering her sad little meals. Because her baby brain hasn't fully developed emotional regulation, the frustration completely overwhelms her, and tears actually start welling up in her eyes. To make matters worse, she realizes she's totally useless right now. She can't even believe Charon had to step in and handle a monster she used to swat away easily. She angrily chews on her pacifier, her head practically spinning with frustration as she glares at the 2 dukes for just standing there staring at her. Deshar asks Charon again why the kid is here, but the younger duke just shrugs indifferently, coldly stating it's none of his business. Hella shoots Charon an absolute death glare for being so dismissive, while Charon casually observes the ruined room, noting it looks exactly like the neglected quarters the previous mistress used to occupy. Hella dramatically says goodbye to her smashed food babies, mourning the tragic loss of her hard-earned berries. Deshar finally snaps, screaming at the top of his lungs to know where the maid in charge of the child is. He orders Kant to drag the responsible servant in immediately. But Charon coldly intervenes, casually stating there's no need to get so worked up over someone of her low status. Deshar glares at his son, firmly reminding him that the baby is still his brother's child and carries the crown bloodline. Hella just sits there in the middle of the mess, totally confused by the sudden intense family drama. A cold sweat drops down her face as she wonders if they finally figured out she's the one raiding their precious garden. Charon watches his father, internally scoffing and thinking the old man has grown weak over the years. He suddenly steps toward Hella, making her flinch and scramble backward. He dryly mentions how she basically ate everything in his garden, figuring she was just trying to hide out there. He specifically brings up the strawberry patch, confirming he knows exactly where she's been foraging. He crouches down to her eye level, studying her intensely. His sharp eyes narrow as he notes she somehow looks even thinner than the last time he saw her. Hella's eyes go wide, terrified that the iron-blooded demon is actually going to try and hold her. Instead of a normal hug, he literally just pinches the back of her dress and lifts her into the air like a totally helpless kitten. She dangles there, absolutely mortified by the sheer embarrassment of the moment. Still, her little knees are so wrecked from crawling that she secretly hopes he just carries her the rest of the way. Staring at the baby, Charon actually turns to his father and asks for her name. Deshar looks away, quietly admitting he doesn't actually know it because he ignored his late brother when he tried to tell him. Hella couldn't care less about their guilt trip, mentally declaring she doesn't need their namesake to conquer the world. But to achieve world domination, she definitely needs a bath to wash off all this nasty monster fight dust. She plots to sneak off to the washroom the second the Dukes leave her alone. Deshar completely ignores her, turning his attention away to his son. Luckily, Charent left the heavy double doors wide open, meaning she won't have to burn any mana trying to escape. But just as she gets ready to dip, a whole squad of maids suddenly rushes into the room. Kant steps forward, announcing he's brought the staff as ordered. Deshar's eyes narrow, demanding to know why an entire group is here when he specifically asked for the one maid in charge. The room's atmosphere instantly drops below freezing as the Duke threatens them. The killing intent is so thick you could cut it with a knife, but Hella just sits on the floor like a complete bystander. She mentally begs the terrified maids to just step aside so she can go get her bath. Kant calmly steps in, explaining that the originally assigned maid abruptly quit, and the handover was a total disaster. Hella glances at the butler, highly impressed by how totally unbothered he is while everyone else is sweating bullets. She notes that it's nice having a competent guy like him keeping the estate running. Realizing her escape route is completely blocked, she plops her chubby self back onto the floor. She decides a tactical retreat isn't happening right now, so she might as well just sit tight and enjoy the show. But as she chills, she notices Charent is still staring directly at her. To her absolute horror, the cold-blooded psycho actually cracks a faint smile, sending a massive shiver down her spine. Deshar interrogates the maids, asking how a literal baby managed to survive alone in this forgotten room. The maids all violently shake their heads, completely clueless. Losing his patience, Deshar asks when they last bothered to check on the child. The answers are a total train wreck. 2 months, 6 weeks, a whole month. Hella is absolutely flabbergasted by their sheer audacity. She thinks about how insanely cruel this world is, knowing a normal infant would have starved to death weeks ago. Deshar finally does the math, horrified that it's been at least 2 weeks since anyone even looked at his crawling niece. He absolutely loses it, screaming that they are all completely insane as the maids beg for their lives. Hella just side-eyes him, wondering why he's acting like Father of the Year when he's the one who threw her in this dusty closet to begin with. Despite the dramatic apologies, she knows none of them actually care if she starves. Her stomach aggressively rumbles, and she glares at a phantom apple, deeply regretting that her new baby teeth can't chew properly. Suddenly, a sharp smack rings out, making Hella jump. Deshar whips around, asking Kant what he just did. The composed butler calmly adjusts his glasses, offering a completely deadpan apology for striking one of the negligent maids. Hella sits in awe at the sheer brutality, wondering if this is seriously how they treat someone with noble blood. Deshar demands to know how a helpless baby managed to survive alone in a dusty room for 2 solid weeks. Hella casually shrugs her tiny shoulders, thinking it was simple. She has working arms and legs, so she just crawled out and found her own food. Before Deshar can dig deeper, he shakes his head, realizing that playing detective isn't the priority right now. Realizing she's actually safe for the moment with Charent standing right there, Hella decides to use this opportunity to bounce. Her palms and soles are aching, she's absolutely sick of the drama, and most importantly, her stomach is still totally empty. She looks down at her completely filthy dress, her scraped knees making her feel incredibly gross and uncomfortable. She spots the open double doors leading to the hallway, her eyes practically sparkling at the promise of freedom and a clean bath. But the second she starts to scooch away, she suddenly feels herself lifting off the ground. Charent has literally just snagged the back of her dress again, dangling her in the air with zero effort. Hella's face completely drops. Why is he picking her up again? She looks over at Deshar, pleading with her eyes for the older Duke to say something and make his psycho son put her down. She violently kicks her little legs, completely fed up with both of these annoying men treating her like a piece of luggage. Charent completely ignores her struggles, casually telling his father that she survived by breaking into his private garden to steal flowers and fruit. Deshar turns to Kant, asking exactly how old she is. Kant estimates she's around 11 months. Hella flails around, mentally complaining that she's not a literal bell meant to be swung around in the air. She fumes, annoyed that she has to suffer this humiliating position in front of all the maids who starved her. Deshar strokes his chin, processing that an 11-month-old pulled off a master heist in his son's garden. He finds it completely absurd that a baby that young could independently escape her room, forage for specific berries, stash them, and feed herself for 2 weeks straight. He agrees that the kid is insanely quick-witted, much more than any normal infant. Meanwhile, Hella mentally complains that Charon's son, Kaishin, never bothered to mention his dad's messy divorce story, leaving her feeling totally unequipped for this family drama. She whines out loud, aggressively chewing her pacifier, officially done with this entire conversation. Charon completely misinterprets her angry babbling and simply drops her onto the floor. She hits the carpet and immediately glares up at him, internally calling him a sleazy jerk for letting her fall. She huffs, vowing to absolutely avenge this disrespect once she's older and stronger. Deshar suddenly steps forward, slowly taking off his glove with a very calculated look in his eye. Hella mentally hypes herself up, actually pretty proud of how fast her baby reflexes are developing. As Deshar approaches, she immediately goes into defensive mode, warning him not to come any closer. The older Duke ignores her entirely, turning to Kant and ordering him to completely overhaul her living situation. New room, new maids, everything. He kneels down on the floor, holding his hands out warmly, and gently tells her to come over. He promises that if she lets him hold her, she'll never have to worry about scavenging for food ever again. Hella hesitates. Her past life pride screams that accepting help from her former enemies is totally foolish. But she looks up at Charent, realizing the terrifying Duke honestly hasn't made a single move to hurt her. She figures giving the old man a quick hug isn't the worst thing in the world, deciding she really just needs someone to wipe her face. She lets Deshar pick her up, immediately nestling into his shoulder. She has to admit the guy is weirdly comfortable to lean on. Deshar is visibly stunned by how easily she accepted him, while Charent just stares blankly, not having expected his cold father to actually hold the kid. Hella, sensing the shift in dynamics, decides to lock in her safety. She dramatically reaches for Deshar and babbles, "Papa." Deshar completely freezes, his brain short-circuiting as he asks her to repeat what she just said. Kant gasps, realizing the infant might actually be calling the Duke father. Hella internally screams, totally mortified by her own baby instincts making her say something so embarrassing. Deshar is still in shock. He wonders how an 11-month-old who's been isolated for weeks can even pronounce a word so clearly. But Charent suddenly smirks. He completely misinterprets her babble, claiming she wasn't saying "Papa" but was actually cursing them out. Deshar quickly regains his composure, brushing off his son's ridiculous suggestion with a light laugh. Kant politely points out the massive elephant in the room. They still haven't officially named the poor child. He explains that because she was abandoned and isolated, she's literally never been called by a real name. Deshar furrows his brow, desperately trying to remember what his late brother Valian had planned to call her. He thinks it was Sharina. But as they discuss her future, Hella starts aggressively rubbing her eyes, her adrenaline completely crashing. The stress of the monster attack and the family drama finally catches up to her, and she passes out cold on Deshar's shoulder. Deshar looks down at her tiny, sleeping face, remembering when his brother's pregnant lover first disappeared with the child. Charent watches her sleep, silently agreeing that it makes sense she looks a bit rough since she's been essentially fending for herself for almost a year. In the end, they all realize that whether she's a half-blood or not, this tiny infant has somehow survived against all odds, practically raising herself in just a few chaotic months. Deshar agrees the kid is incredibly smart, completely impressed by her survival skills. He gently pokes her forehead, noting she literally rolled around the estate just to avoid starving. Hella babbles angrily in response, completely fed up with them treating her like a rag doll. Deshar is confused by her attitude, but Charent brings the conversation back to the garden. Charent glances at her tiny hands, remembering how clumsily she moved out there. He knows exactly what she was doing, sneaking into his precious garden and cutting off his flowers and fruits. Looking closely, he sees her tiny hands are totally covered in scratches and wounds from his rose thorns. The iron-blooded demon coldly admits he originally planned to make her disappear in a convenient little accident. Deshar shoots him a warning look, but Charent isn't finished. He admits he actually held back for once. Watching this tiny baby run away and fight so desperately just to survive, he decided to just let it slide. It was a half-hearted mercy, but an absolute massive win for Hella's survival. He stares at her, almost amused by her sheer grit. Deshar turns to Kant, making it crystal clear that neglecting a child of the Crown family is absolutely unacceptable. He refuses to let a starving child ruin their prestigious family name. Kant bows respectfully, promising to handle the situation properly from now on. With the crisis averted, Charent excuses himself to go comfort little Kaishin. Deshar immediately goes into boss mode, ordering Kant to set up a brand new room, assign competent maids, and get a doctor in ASAP. Kant hesitates for a split second about the doctor, but when Dessar glares at him, Kant quickly falls in line. Exhausted from her chaotic near-death day, Hella completely knocks out, sleeping peacefully in the Duke's arms. Fast forward and Hella wakes up in a gorgeously sunlit, spotless new room. She stretches her tiny limbs, yawning among beautiful sunflowers. A brand new, fancy-looking maid immediately steps up and greets her warmly. Hella pops her trusty pacifier back into her mouth out of pure habit. The maid smiles, thinking it's adorable. But Hella quickly realizes all those desperate pond washes have taken a serious toll on her favorite item. The thing is practically falling apart from old age. Suddenly, her baby instincts betray her and she accidentally drops the pacifier. The new maid completely panics, rushing over like it's a massive emergency. Hella mentally scolds herself. The legendary archmage Hella getting groggy and dropping her binky, so embarrassing. But she does notice a huge silver lining. Her baby babble is finally starting to sound like actual words. Suddenly, the new maid starts bawling her eyes out, looking at Hella with intense, dramatic pity. She grabs a handkerchief, sobbing about how Hella has no mother. Hella just sits there side-eyeing her, totally confused by the random soap opera happening in her crib. She looks around, taking in her massive VIP upgrade. She's got a high-quality crib, a huge sunny room, and everything is sparkling clean. Yet somehow, despite all this luxury, she's absolutely baffled that they didn't bother to replace her crusty old pacifier. She mentally complains, wondering why they didn't just buy a new one to match the fancy new digs. The crying maid sniffles, offering to go to the market to buy a fresh one. The maid dramatically reveals that Hella won't be receiving any official funds anymore, continuing to cry while calling her lady. Hella rolls her eyes, finding the fake pity and constant crying super annoying. The maid introduces herself as Cicely, but Hella literally could not care less about her name. All Hella hears is the bad news: no funds equals no new pacifier. But then a genius idea hits her. She remembers hiding a massive secret fortune of magical gems in her past life. She stashed treasures all over the world just in case she died, and she distinctly remembers burying some right here in the Aeron Empire. The only problem is figuring out how a literal baby is supposed to reach that secret location. Realizing Cicely's market trip is her golden ticket, Hella reaches out and enthusiastically yells, "Market." Cicely gasps, completely mind-blown that a 12-month-old baby actually understood her and is trying to speak. But Hella completely freezes in horror. Did Cicely just say 12 months? She realizes she's already a whole year old and has spent her entire second life just eating and sleeping. The blonde nanny claps her hands, gloating about keeping the baby locked up inside. She smirks, claiming that disobedient puppies need to be trained. She steps up, officially starting her twisted training session. The baby recoils, instantly sensing that something is very wrong. The nanny's footsteps echo menacingly as she calls the little lady over. The baby freezes in pure terror. The baby realizes this woman's eyes are completely unhinged. She recalls how her own dark magic relies on negative energy. Because of that, she's seen plenty of psychos in her past life. But the sheer amount of dark aura rolling off this nanny is absolutely wild. The baby opens her mouth to scream for help, but the nanny just shoves a pacifier in, telling her to quiet down. The baby goes rigid, completely trapped. She panics, realizing her tiny baby arms can't even pull the pacifier out. For a split second, she thinks sucking on it actually feels kind of nice. But then reality hits. If she stays like this, she'll literally starve to death. The nanny shushes her, demanding she act like an adorable little pet. Smiling like a maniac, the nanny orders the baby to jump from the bed. Left with no choice, the baby gathers all her tiny strength and leaps. The nanny watches, totally unfazed. The baby goes flying out the massive doors like a tiny cannonball. The psychotic nanny just claps and laughs, completely amused by her flying puppy. Hitting the ground, the baby plans to escape to Charent's garden. She remembers a dark flashback of Charent ruthlessly telling someone to aim for the neck. Hearing the nanny call out, the baby desperately scrambles away. She curses Charent for hiring such a psycho to watch her. She quickly pieces it together. This twisted training must be the nanny's revenge for a ruined garden. The nanny's heels click ominously down the hall as the baby crawls for her life. The nanny smiles, sadistically taunting her as she slowly closes the distance. Tears well up in the baby's eyes, completely frustrated by her tiny, helpless body. But suddenly, she spots a tall figure at the end of the hall. It's Charent. She panics, wondering why it had to be him out of all people. Desperate to avoid him, she tries to quickly shift to another corridor. But he strides right toward her with a menacing smile. Meanwhile, the crazy nanny is still creeping up from behind. Caught between a rock and a hard place, the baby spots an open door and makes her move. She readies herself to dash straight through it. But suddenly, a large hand grabs her right by the collar. She dangles in the air, terrified that the creepy nanny caught her. A deep voice asks what she's doing out in the hallway alone. The baby freezes, recognizing that voice. It's Charent, and he's standing right next to the Duke. The baby groans internally, completely wrecked that she got busted by the two scariest guys in the house. Charent stares at her with piercing eyes. He scoops her up into his arms, leaving her totally confused. The Duke sternly demands to know what's going on. Right on cue, the two-faced nanny pops up, acting shocked to see them. The Duke glares, asking why the child is wandering around. The nanny instantly puts on a fake innocent act, claiming the baby just crawled away when she blinked. The baby fumes in Charent's arms, absolutely disgusted that she's being framed by this psycho snake. As she stews in Charent's arms, the baby's pride takes a massive hit. The Duke sternly reminds the nanny that she was supposed to be taking good care of the child. The baby glares at the woman, completely baffled that a mere baroness gets to act so high and mighty. The two-faced nanny smiles sweetly, swearing she only took her eyes off the baby for a second. But the nanny's dark, threatening glare promises there won't be a next time. The baby realizes her actual life isn't in danger right now, it's her pride that's taking a beating. Desperate, she considers using a black magic curse to gain some power. Unlike normal magic that flows from nature, black magic feeds entirely on human resentment and malicious intent. Because of this, literally anyone can use it, even without an ounce of natural talent. Technically, she is now a child possessing this dark power. But there's one massive problem staring her in the face. She has absolutely no idea if her tiny, fragile body can handle the deadly price of a curse. It's a huge gamble. If she pulls it off, she'll unlock insane levels of dark magic. It'll take time for her body to adapt, but she decides to say YOLO and just cast the curse, figuring she'll deal with the fallout later. But right as she plots her revenge, Charent suddenly smirks. The baby freezes, totally weirded out by his sudden change in mood. He reaches out and gently taps her pacifier. She stares at him, completely baffled by his mild voice and gentle expression. But then it hits her, Charent is a master manipulator. His words might be ice cold, but his sweet tone easily brainwashes people into nodding along. Even the evil nanny is completely captivated by him. The baby realizes that if the devil is real, he's definitely standing right in front of her. Charent casually asks the nanny who she thinks the real problem is here. Suddenly, the pacifier slips from the baby's mouth, dangling by its chain. The baby watches it fall in pure shock. She mentally screams for her pacifier while Charent just stares blankly. The Duke awkwardly steps in, grabbing the toy for her. He nervously tries to hand it back, looking completely out of his element. The baby flails wildly, absolutely losing her mind over the dangling pacifier. Startled, she instinctively chomps down on it. She immediately curses herself for acting like an actual infant. And to make it worse, the Duke is staring at her like she's some kind of alien creature. She shivers, completely mortified to be acting this way while stuck in Charent's arms. Meanwhile, the nanny plays dumb, pretending she doesn't understand Charent's question. The atmosphere in the room instantly drops below freezing. Charent taps the pacifier again, asking the nanny exactly what this is. Without missing a beat, the two-faced woman claims it's for educational purposes. Charent's eyes narrow as he asks what kind of education requires a gag. The baby's eyes go wide, realizing Charent wasn't the one who bought this awful thing for her. The nanny doubles down, lying through her teeth that she was just trying to discipline the rude baby. Hearing this bold-faced lie, the baby absolutely loses it. She wants to completely wreck this woman, but she's trapped by the pacifier and her tiny body. Charent looks down, dryly asking if she's crying. The baby throws a massive tantrum, wildly swinging her little fists like a windmill. But her rage goes totally ignored as Charent and the nanny just stare at her awkwardly. Completely defeated and exhausted, she finally gives up, sucking on her pacifier in shame. Surprisingly, Charent gently sets her down on the floor, leaving her totally clueless about what this devil is plotting next. The baby is absolutely fuming, completely overwhelmed by shame and rage. She decides she needs to release her anger right now, mentally plotting how to destroy the wicked nanny. She unleashes a furious baby scream at the woman, demanding respect. Suddenly, Charent raises a hand, freezing the baroness in her tracks. His eyes glow with pure menace, as he casually threatens to completely erase her family name from the imperial nobility if she even twitches. The nanny gasps, absolutely terrified. She desperately tries to play the victim card to the Duke, claiming she was only thinking of his family. But the Duke coldly shuts her down, warning her that some things are better left unquestioned. Meanwhile, the baby is still locked in her own chaotic thoughts. Deciding she doesn't care anymore, she straight up bites the Duke's leg. But the second she bites down, she realizes she just put something super questionable in her mouth. Her stomach instantly turns, wondering if stupidity is actually infectious. The nanny loses her cool, shrieking at the Duke for bringing such lowly, dirty situations into his noble house. The Duke doesn't even flinch, calmly stating that he decides what is dirty and lowly around here. Charon steps back in, hitting her with the ultimate flex. If he tells her to crawl and bark like a dog, she'll do it. The vibe shifts entirely. Charon projects the aura of a massive, glowing alpha wolf, making the nanny realize she's nothing but prey. She completely stiffens, frozen in pure fear. Charon coldly whispers that he absolutely despises two-faced liars and stupidity. He orders her to pack up, go back to her mansion, lock the doors, and keep her mouth completely shut. Flashing a chilling smile, he suggests she draw the curtains too, just to be safe. The nanny's legs give out, dropping to the floor like a sack of potatoes. She thought she was untouchable because she was protecting their terrible reputation. But Charon coldly asks how long they were supposed to just put up with her. He hints that anyone who disrespects their bloodline gets dealt with permanently. To him, keeping her around is basically a prison sentence. It turns out the clown family isn't just rich. They're closely tied to the royals, and even the king treads lightly around them. Rumor has it that anyone who crosses Charon vanishes without a single trace. Charon frames his terrifying threat as mere advice, making it clear her family is doomed if she disobeys. The nanny starts sweating bullets, finally realizing how badly she messed up. Completely defeated, she bows her head and claims she'll be stepping down due to a weak body. The Duke immediately orders the maids to escort the trash out. Sitting on the floor, the baby is low-key terrified by how insanely cruel Charon's voice just got. She pulls her pacifier out, deciding to just let go of the past and act like a normal kid. But wait, revenge is an entirely different story. She might be a baby, but she still fully plans to make that noble family pay a brutal price. She runs through her curse checklist: straw holly, 12 rose thorns, and the target's hair. She figures finding the nanny's hair in her room will be a piece of cake. But suddenly she gets scooped up into the air. The Duke stares at her with a totally bewildered expression. The baby completely panics, wondering what this guy wants now. He scolds her for being dumb and getting her knees dirty on the floor. She looks at her tiny hands, utterly confused by his sudden concern. In her past life, getting injured was just a normal Tuesday for her, so she doesn't even feel the pain anymore. She totally gave up on self-pity a long time ago. But right now, she just wants out. She violently flails in his arms, demanding to be put down. The Duke awkwardly holds her tight, bouncing her around and telling her to chill because it's dangerous. The heavy bouncing instantly gives the baby insane motion sickness. She looks like she's about to absolutely hurl. Seeing her suddenly quiet down, the Duke proudly assumes she finally understands him. He smugly notes that even animals instinctively know when to behave around a predator. The baby fumes, completely insulted that she's being compared to a pet, but then he catches her off guard by whispering that she's cute, just like her. The baby realizes the Duke is actually telling her not to repeat his past mistakes. She stares in awe as he promises he won't ever let her starve or suffer under a trash nanny again. To prove he's serious, he swears it on his family name. The baby looks up at him, noticing that the usually intimidating Duke suddenly looks completely exhausted. He gently pats her back, and she realizes he's been totally stressed out all day just because of her. The Duke sighs, wondering out loud what the baby even did to cause all this chaos. Then he orders his butler to find a highly experienced maid to take over her childcare duties. He shoots Charon a look, noting that the usually chaotic guy is surprisingly quiet. Charon smoothly replies that it's better to let things unfold naturally instead of causing a scene. The Duke agrees, and the baby finally gets some much-needed peace as she falls asleep in his arms. Later that night, darkness falls over the mansion, but the baby is already on the move, sneaking through the moonlit corridors. Thanks to the new, soft padding on her knees, she's crawling at max speed, totally fearless. Plus, she doesn't even need to reach the doorknobs. With a quick stare, she uses her magic to blow the doors wide open. She quickly locates the cursed straw doll she stashed earlier in the day. Now all she has to do is chuck it into a roaring fire to kickstart her revenge. But suddenly, someone calls out her name. She turns around and spots a young boy clutching a pillow, looking totally miserable. Tears stream down his face as he hiccups, crying out for his mom. The baby instantly panics, knowing his loud sobbing is going to wake up the whole mansion. She stares up at him, thinking he looks absolutely pathetic, standing there dripping tears. Without hesitating, she grabs his shirt and aggressively wipes his face. The boy looks down at her, completely stunned by the tiny baby's actions. In her eyes, he basically looks like a sad, abandoned puppy sitting out in the rain. He awkwardly rubs his eyes, trying to calm himself down. He sniffles, telling her how much he misses his mom. The baby watches him, thinking there's absolutely nothing she can do to help him with that. She wonders for a second if she misses her own mom, but quickly decides she definitely doesn't. To her, parents are just faded shadows, and she has zero emotional attachment to faces she doesn't even know. Seeing the boy finally calm down, she refocuses on her main mission, burning that cursed doll. Deciding it's time to level up, she attempts to walk instead of crawling. As soon as she stands, her tiny legs wobble like jelly. Walking is way harder than she thought. But she pushes through and finally manages to stand on her own 2 feet. She figures it's super weird for a kid her age to still be crawling everywhere anyway. Just as she's trying to balance, the boy asks what she's doing up so late. He tilts his head, wondering what she's looking for. Desperate to get rid of him, she decides to just scare him off with a rough response. She glares at him and lets out a blunt boo. But instead of running away, the boy just innocently repeats boo back at her. The baby violently facepalms, totally humiliated and wondering if this kid is actually mocking her. She groans internally, hating how utterly dumb she sounds right now. Suddenly, the boy's face lights up as he asks if she's looking for a fire. Smiling brightly, he grabs her tiny hand and starts leading the way to the fireplace. The baby is totally caught off guard by his gentle grip. She mentally calls him an idiot, knowing she's heading into dangerous territory and her survival skills absolutely dwarf his. As she watches him, she realizes this timid, completely normal kid is the exact opposite of Charent. She wonders how a sweet kid like him could ever grow up into someone cold, realizing he must just be a softie when it comes to family. But she clenches her tiny fist, absolutely refusing to let herself get soft like that. In her past life, she learned the hard way that trusting your so-called family and colleagues only leads to the ultimate betrayal. She remembers seeing the notoriously cold Duke actually being gentle with his own son. But she refuses to get her hopes up. In her past life, trusting others completely wrecked her, so she shuts down those warm feelings instantly. Snapping back to reality, the boy cheerfully calls out her name. He leads her right to a massive, magically lit fireplace. Sharina stares at the flames, instantly recognizing the rare magical tech from her past life as a legendary tower master. Gripping the cursed straw doll, she suddenly feels super conflicted about tossing it into the fire. She hesitates, deciding she should probably just head back to her room before her new maid catches her sneaking around. Looking down at her tiny hands, she realizes that constantly plotting dark magic revenge while living under 24/7 surveillance sounds utterly exhausting. Honestly, what's the difference between being locked away in her past life and being trapped in this tiny baby body now? It's basically the exact same prison. The boy gently warns her not to throw her toy in the flames, and she drops her hand with a grumpy pout, officially giving up on the curse. Suddenly, the boy shuffles his little slippers nervously. Looking at her with huge, sad eyes like a totally terrified puppy, he shyly asks if he can sleep in her room tonight.